Part 3. How we made music despite. I took my trumpet to war. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. I thought I'd earn spare cash by playing Fall In, Charge, Retreat, Lights Out, etc. I put a printed card on the battery notice board showing my scale of charges. Fall In, 1 and 6. Fall Out, 1 shilling. Charge, 1 and 9. Halt, £648. Retreat, pianissimo, 4 shillings. Retreat, fortissimo, 10 shillings. Lights Out, 3 shillings. Lights Out, played in private, 4 shillings. While waiting for these commissions, I'd lie on my palliasse and play tunes like Body and Soul, Can't Get Started, Stardust. It was with mixed feeling that I played something as exotic as You Go to My Head, watching some hairy gunner cutting his toenails. Of course, I soon contacted the jazz addicts. I was introduced to a 6'2", dreamy-eyed gunner, Harry Edgington, a Londoner. He was an extraordinary man with moral scruples that would have pleased Jesus. It was the start of a lifelong friendship. Harry played the piano, self-taught. He delighted me with some tunes he had composed. He couldn't read music and favoured 2 keys, F-sharp and C-sharp, both keys the terror of the jazzman. However, over the months I'd bust tunes with him in the naffy. I taught him the names of the various chords, and he was soon playing in the keys that made life easier for me on the trumpet. He was always game for a jam, any time. And of course, start to hum any tune, and Harry would be in harmony with you on the spot. It helped life a lot to have him around. One day, with nothing but money in mind, I suggested to Harry we try and form a band. Harry grinned and looked disbelieving. Just the 2 of us? Well, we could sit far apart, I said. A stroke of luck, a driver. Alf Files was posted to us with suspected rabies, and he played the guitar. All we needed now was a drummer. We advertised in Part 2 orders. Wanted house-trained drummer, academic training advantage, but not essential. Applied to the gunners Milligan and Edgington. No coloureds, but men with names like Duke Ellington given preference. No one came forward. We were stuck. Worse, we were stuck in the bloody army. But Milligan had the eye of an eagle, the ear of a dog, and the brain of a newt. We've all got to eat. 1 meal a day. As the dining hall rang to the grinding of teeth on gritty cabbages, came the sound of a rhythmic beat. It was a humble gunner hammering on a piece of Leaseland bacon, trying to straighten it out for the kill. This was driver Douglas Kidgel. Would he like to be our drummer? Yes. Good. Now where to get the drums? Gunner Nick Carter said there was a certain drum kit lying fallow under the stage of the Old Town Church Hall. Captain Martin, a sort of commissioned Ned Kelly, suggested we requisition the certain drum kit to prevent it falling into German hands. This sort of patriotism goes deep. The Germany poised to strike, we couldn't waste time. We took the drums and camouflaged them by painting on the artillery crest. Kidgel soon got the hang of the drums, and lo, we were a quartet. After a month's practice, Captain Martin asked, could we play for a dance? I told him we had a very limited repertoire, and he said, so have I. We'll hold the dance this Saturday. Gad, this was the big time. The Old Town Church Hall, Bexhill. Who knows, next week, Broadway, Hollywood. In entertainment staff Bexhill, the dance was a sellout. The old corrugated iron hall was packed to suffocation. There were old women, kids, officers, gunners, various wives, very much a village dance affair. After 20 minutes, we'd exhausted our repertoire, so we started again. I suppose playing Honeysuckle Rose 40 times must be some kind of a record. The bar did roaring business, the barman being none other than the Reverend Clegg, regimental vicar. We played well on into the night. About 2 o'clock, Captain Martin called a halt. They all stood to attention, and we played God Save the King. Now for the rewards. To pay us, Captain Martin led us into the churchyard in pitch darkness. There he gave us a 10-shilling note. It's a little something for you lads, he said. 10 bob, said Files painfully. Could we raffle it? Now then, lads, remember there's a war on, said Martin, pocketing the rest. That night, by a flickering candle, we all swore allegiance to Karl Marx. No matter what, next dance, unless we got paid more, we'd play that bloody awful Warsaw Concerto. On pay nights, most of the lads headed for the pubs, where, apart from drinking, a lot of singing was done by the battery duettists, Gunner White and Devine. This was one of their popular ones. I paid my entrance fee to see that tattooed she. She had Sir Hubert Tree tattooed upon her knee. She had the great big Union Jack tattooed upon her back. And down below on her big toe, Jack Johnson done in black. She had a battleship tattooed upon her hip, and where I could not see a map of Germany, she had a picture of Harry Lauder right across where she gets broader, and as a mixture she had a picture of a home in Tennessee. White and Devine were great fans of the band and travelled everywhere with us. Devine, who fancied himself as a Bing Crosby in uniform, often took the vocals. In the months to come we enlivened many a lonely military camp. We saw life. In Upper Dicker we played for a dance come orgy. Couples were disappearing into the tall grass, having it off, and then coming back to the dance. God knows how many coitus interrupti the hesitation waltz caused. But we heard screams from behind the trees. Music has a strange effect on drunks. One lunatic ripped open his battleless, pointed to a scar on his chest, and shouted, "Dunkirk!" I ripped mine open and showed him my appendicitis. "Lewisham Hospital," I said. He had a face made from red plasticine by a child of 3. That or his parachute didn't open. "Do you hear me? You bloody coward, Dunkirk!" he kept saying. I'd no idea what he meant. I confused him by giving him the ladies' spot prize. A fight broke out with the Canadians. They were all massive men. "How do you get such huge men?" I asked one. "We go into the forest, shake the trees, and they fall out," he said. A wired officer rushed up. "Can you play the Maple Leaf forever?" "No, sir. After an hour I get tired." "You're under arrest," he said. In despair, we played the king, shouted everyone back to their own beds, and departed. On Bexhill's seafront stood the Delaware Pavilion, named after Lord Delaware Pavilion, a fine modern building with absolutely no architectural merit at all. It was opened just in time to be bombed. The plane that dropped it was said to have been chartered by the Royal Institute of Architects, piloted by Sir Hugh Casson, with John Bethjeman as the bomb-aimer. The invasion of England, though always imminent, did not stop the reopening of the pavilion for dances by the local Rotary Club. The band could now play on a genuine stage, and a naffy piano-ridden Edgington could perform on a concert Steinway grand. Our MC was Mr. Courtney, who was well known in Bexhill. He owned an antique shop, and when short of stock, put his suits in the window. Occasionally he sang "Mighty Like a Rose" in a quivering light baritone, or "Mighty Like a Baritone" in a quivering rose, which suggested he had a maladjusted truss. He told us he thought Charlie Coombs was the greatest jazz pianist in the world. In his own words, "He's a sort of white Duke Ellington." During the months leading into the winter of 1940, D Battery were the centre of nightlife in war-ridden, sinful Bexhill-on-Sea. I didn't know it at the time, but I was taking the first steps into show business. Hastings had had the pleasure of sounding their sirens about 50 times, Eastbourne about 40, but Bexhill sulked unrecognised. Then it came. A Wednesday night, late in March 1914, the band was doing a gig at a private house in Pevensey Drive. A well-heeled ex-army major was throwing a house party on the occasion of his daughter's coming of age. It had the cobwebs of a dying empire. Men wore slightly dated evening dress. There was one joker from the blues with cavalry spurs. The ladies were in gowns of chiffon that seemed straight from the wardrobe of private lives. It was pretty horsey, but not outrageously so. Though I'm glad to say, the moment we played a 6/8, they all did the cocking of the legs, a sort of English version of the Highland fling. As a parting gift, our host gave us each a £5. We stood stunned. "I'm sorry," said Kidgel, "we haven't got any change here." He waved us off. Outside in the dark, we loaded our gear onto the 1,500-weight truck. Looking up, I saw the night was alive with stars. In the eastern sky I could make out Saturn, Pegasus, Castor and Pollux. I could hear the distant sound of sea washing the pebbled beaches of Pevensey. The Romans must have heard it once. We drove back in silence until Alf Files spoke. £5? He'll ask for it back when he sobers up. It was gone 1 o'clock when we rolled ourselves in our blankets for the big black, as Kidgel calls sleep. We drifted off, talking about the gig. "Did you see that twit trying to do the Big Apple? What about that bird with the big bristles? I must have had 6 doubles. £5 core. Wish we could have more gigs like that. For Christ's sake, don't tell Martin he'll confiscate the money. Lovely piano. Here, you got lost in the middle 8 of Undecided. I don't know what happened. I thought I was playing Hot and Anxious." Gradually the talk faded. Silence. Night. I caught an evening train back to Bexhill and arrived to be informed by Edgington that he had read in the Melody Maker that Harry Parry of the BBC Radio Rhythm Club were holding auditions to find the best unknown jazz musicians. The winners were to make recordings for broadcasting on the BBC Home Service. We wrote off to Harry Parry, care of the BBC London, and we received a reply saying, could we come down on the next weekend? We approached Leather Suitcase. You're going to do what? Do an audition for the BBC. You can't join them. They're civvies. I explained as best as I could to him, bearing in mind that contemporary opinions of jazz in those days were almost the same as that of cannabis today. However, he let me go. And the following weekend, excited out of my mind, I arrived at the BBC studios Maida Vale. Briefly, I was picked as the best trumpet player, and along with the winning alto, trombone and tenor players, we cut a disc. The pianist for this was the then almost unknown George Shearing, and for an hour, along with Harry Parry, we recorded 6 sides. It was an unforgettable day for me. I felt that I had been accepted as a jazzman, and before I left, George Shearing said, "I hope we meet and play again." Man, that was praise enough.